Number 9. Natural Lips, Sudan. One thing Google Earth has done is shown internet users the world in all its bizarre detail. Why do we say bizarre? Well, check out this image that was revealed out in the desert of Sudan. Pucker up because it looks like the landscape is feeling amorous. Though, to be honest, those lips may need some chapstick, we're thinking. Measuring 3,281 feet long, it really is an extraordinary natural feature. What appear to be trees have grown in such a way that they look like a great big kisser from the air. Even the sand has joined in the fun. What could be different colored sand acts like a kind of lipstick shade. This part of the desert is all glammed up with nowhere to go. It's found in West Darfur, in the vicinity of a village called Arawala. We reckon locals wouldn't be able to see the crazy sight at ground level, so they aren't aware their location is giving them some lip. Quite a lot of lip, in fact. Number 8. Trementina Base, New Mexico. The Church of Scientology is one of the most talked about religions and cultural phenomenons in modern history, with its A-list celebrity membership and its founder first achieving success as a sci-fi author. The church has grabbed its fair share of headlines over the years, with the group reportedly being very secretive. That sense of public interest only grows, so it kind of fell to Google Earth to reveal what's reportedly one of its key locations, an area covering 50 to 60 acres in the desert of New Mexico called Trementina Base. Trementina translates into English as turpentine. We're not sure we could explain that one. Anyway, the point here is to showcase this awesome location, which comprises various structures, including what's presumed to be a 3-story house constructed against a hill. According to one journalist, the operation continues extensively underground. There's a cathedral of sorts said to contain the texts of creator L. Ron Hubbard. And these are apparently more than just simple texts. They are engraved onto precious metal and sealed inside capsules for protection. Protection against what? Well, it's thought that a nuclear apocalypse will put mankind out of action. Scientologists will leave and later come back to Trementina Base. How will they know where to find it? Simple-ish. There are 2 prominent markers in the shape of overlapping circles containing a diamond. This symbol is reportedly owned by the Church of Technology, itself connected to Hubbard's organization. A tunnel network is also said to form part of an underground survival area. Trementina Base has its own water supply, useful for being way out in the desert, but also great if a nuclear winter comes along. The base has been viewed from above by Google Earth, but what is it actually like inside? One man who's been there and done that is a Las Vegas policeman who, we should point out, wasn't a Scientologist. As he reported, he took a tour but wasn't entirely convinced everything was completely as it seemed. Will we ever discover what goes down at Trementina Base? Should there be anything to tell? Or do we wait for a nuke to go off before everything becomes clear? Hopefully not the latter option. Number 7. Island within a lake within an island with a lake. Philippines. If you happen to be living on Luzon Island, part of the Philippine archipelago, you might feel a little cut off from time to time. That's natural, what with living on an island and all. However, spare a thought for Volcano Island. That's the island that's part of Luzon Island. Come again? An island? Within an island? How does that work? It's about to get even more confusing because this island also contains its own island. Before you reach for the painkillers, allow us to explain. Luzon Island features Lake Taal. Clear so far? That lake plays host to Volcano Island. As you can imagine, they don't call it that because it's a placid spot where nothing happened. The area has seen its fair share of hot stuff from under the ground. We're getting sidetracked. Volcano Island being what it is, there's a crater, and that crater has filled with water, creating a lake called, well, Crater Lake. Then, amazingly, Crater Lake has another island. Reports state it's actually more like a bump named Vulcan Point. Put all of this together and you have one heck of a geographical puzzle. You can arguably only get a true picture of it via Google Earth. This location isn't unique, but it's almost there. Only one other place exists in the world with this type of layout, and that's over in Canada. Number 6. Azarak Oasis Wheels, Jordan. Many places across the globe have ancient sites that are truly mysterious. Stone circles are a familiar sight to various cultures. Over in the Middle Eastern country of Jordan, however, there's a stone mystery that's maybe more intriguing than most. Looking from the air, experts have observed structures that are shaped like wheels. Check out this spoke-like design. They almost appear like little drawings from way out here, but believe us, at ground level, they're anything but. At the Azarak Oasis, which is situated in Jordan's eastern desert and made up of wetlands, a group of these wheels were investigated from above. They have an unusual layout in that their spokes are aligned to the southeast and northwest. This makes them stand out from other examples in the country. What's the significance of the orientation? Experts believe the spokes are supposed to be aimed in the direction of a winter solstice sunrise. It's a possible reason, though ultimately people don't know. The local people, the Bedouins, reportedly offer a vague explanation that the structures were placed there by their ancestors. Researchers have managed to pinpoint the age of a couple of these structures out in the Black Desert. Found in an area called Wadi Wisad, they were assessed using OSL, or optically stimulated luminescence. Put simply, this works out when sediment is exposed to light over time. How old were the structures? Some 8,500 years old. There's clearly still much to do in establishing what the wheels are and their true purpose. The answers won't come swiftly though, we're afraid. These wheels have been talked about and documented since the early 20th century. Maybe we'll know more in another 100 years or so, right? Number 5. Aircraft Boneyard, USA. What exactly is an aircraft boneyard? It's a place where planes go to die, it looks like. Though in the case of the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, things aren't as bleak as they may seem. On the base is the 309th AMARG, or Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group. You can bring an aircraft here either to junk it or pass it on to another pilot. Doesn't it harm the planes, leaving them out in the Arizona desert? Surprisingly, no. In fact, this location was chosen due to the optimal outdoor conditions. There's low humidity and rainfall, reducing the chances of rust. Also, the altitude here is a reported 2,550 feet, making the air quality on the friendly side. So if you take a trip to the Boneyard or check it out on Google Earth, what do you see? This fascinating place could be described as a museum. It's been in operation since the 1940s. Planes such as a B-29 Superfortress, C-47 Skytrain, and a Convair B-36 Peacemaker can be found. The vehicles number in the hundreds. There's so much going on here. No wonder it's the biggest aircraft boneyard of its kind on the planet, huh? On arrival, the planes are stripped of stuff like weaponry if they're former military craft, and their leftover fuel is removed. Then they get a good wash. Plus, they also get some extra help in coping with those helpful but harsh desert conditions. A plastic compound known as Spraylat can be sprayed on the bodywork for protection. We guess it's a little like slapping on some sunblock. Lord knows you need that out in Arizona. Did you know that there were aircraft recycling sites like this one? Let me know what other cool things you found while perusing Google Earth in the comments below. And make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Number 4. Blood Lake, Iraq. This may look like something out of a horror movie, but it's all too real. Google Earth captured this vivid and scary image of a lake in Iraq that's colored bright red. Named Lago Vermelho, it's in the Sadr city area of Baghdad, and certainly got the internet talking when images were posted. The perhaps reassuring news is that this was a temporary state of affairs. Reports state that Lago Vermelho is looking more watery these days, and not like a butcher's bucket. Speaking of butchers, and press fast forward if you're squeamish, the red coloring has been put down to local establishments throwing blood and such into the lake. We should point out, however, that this is only a theory. Truth be told, no one seems to know why this phenomenon happened. Some have offered the explanation of salt levels in the water. Others say that this is a disturbing side effect of pollution. Because the red is no longer there, it remains a tantalizing mystery, and a gruesome looking one. Number 3. Witchy Pentagram, Kazakhstan. If you thought an apparent lake of blood was freaky, wait till you check this out. Yes, thanks to Google Earth, we have the striking image of what looks like a pentagram in Kazakhstan. It's estimated to be 1,200 feet in diameter. It is situated to the south of the Upper Tobol Reservoir. This deserted part of the country is reportedly an unexplored haven for archaeologists. So, is this a chilling remnant of some ancient evil? With the nearest city 12 miles away, this might be the perfect spot to summon any demonic forces from beyond our world. Before you get too excited or flee your room in terror, there's a practical explanation for the epic pentagram. It's actually a star-shaped park dating back to the days of the Soviet Union in Asia. Instead of sacrificing goats, you'd probably be more likely to take your dog for a walk here, right? Number 2. So who owns this land? Persian Gulf. We'll give you 3 guesses as to who owns this island in the Persian Gulf. Only joking, it's abundantly clear what the answer is thanks to Google Earth. Abu Dhabi has been even more noticeable from space, owing to a 2-mile-long, half-a-mile-wide Hamad that was painstaking and epically made in the sand. Who exactly is Hamad? Well, to give him his full name, he's Sheikh Hamad bin Hamdan Al Nahyan, a member of Abu Dhabi royalty no less. As pointed out at the time, though honestly you can't miss it, the letters H and A were filled with water from the adjoining Arabian Gulf Strait. There was speculation back in 2011 when this astonishing sight came to light. Had the name been created for purely egocentric reasons? Was it a tourist draw? Whatever the reason, it was an incredible feat both for structural and vanity purposes. The fun appears to have lasted for a couple of years. In 2013, the letters were removed, though a reason wasn't provided. Maybe it was a case of doing something to see if it could be done. The Sheikh certainly isn't short of cash when it comes to realizing a large-scale project, so Hamad may be no more, but the evidence is preserved forever because of modern technology. The sands of time may shift, but Google sees all. Number 1. Secret alien base in Antarctica? If aliens landed on Earth, where's a likely place they'd go? Antarctica? Surely too chilly. But hey, they're ETs. Maybe they come from a freezing cold planet, or it could make sense to pick somewhere remote where they won't be detected by humans. Might they have landed already in the snowy wastes, and we just don't know about it yet? According to some avid studiers of Google Earth, this just might be the case. In 2021, evidence of what's believed to be a hidden alien base was spotted via the website. And when we say hidden, we weren't kidding. Submerged underwater, the base is said to be approximately 111 miles off the coast. This could be the remains of ancient structures. Some say they can see walls down there, for example. Is that a landing zone for UFOs? How long ago were the aliens here? This is one of those stories that raises more questions than it answers. The idea of ancient aliens whose activities predate and maybe influence our culture is long established. Is Google Earth really the right tool to discover such things? Possibly, but the potential for error is super high. After all, you're just sitting in your chair at home, and all too often these deals can be natural phenomena that just look different in this context. The only way to settle the matter maybe is to fly out to Antarctica, put a thermal wetsuit, and dive down to check out the area for yourself. Not that we advise that you do that personally. Perhaps researchers will look into this eerie underwater mystery sometime in the near future.
Number 10. The Buffalo. A team of volunteers in England spent 5 long days digging out an immaculately preserved tank from World War II. The tank had been buried 30 feet beneath the ground for approximately 74 years. The tank is an LVT-4, a 26-foot-long amphibious vehicle nicknamed the Buffalo. These tanks were used by U.S. troops in the Pacific as they fought against Japan. Sometimes they were even armed with flamethrowers. The tank was found underneath a field on the outskirts of Peterborough. According to historical records, the tank was just one of 16 brought in to help the nearby villages during the 1947 floods. That was when an incredibly high tide caused the River Welland to burst, threatening all the nearby farmland. All the crops and animals were compromised. From what we know, at least 5 amphibious vehicles were lost during the flooding. 1 was recovered, 2 sank in fishing pits, 1 is still missing, and this newest one has just been pulled out of the dirt. That's a pretty incredible feat, seeing as this thing weighs 20 tons. But because it was buried under 30 feet of peat and clay, it's remained in pristine condition. It actually looks brand new despite being almost a century old. Number 9. The Bomber in Lake Mead. A bomber from World War II was found at the bottom of Lake Mead. It crashed into the lake in 1948, smashing into the giant reservoir along the border of Arizona and Nevada. After its initial crash, officials did try to track the plane down and remove it, but they failed. It wasn't until the early 2000s that the plane was found almost perfectly intact. And now that the water level of Lake Mead is getting lower and lower, there's been some whispers that the bomber might finally be removed and restored. According to the official crash report, the pilot was flying low as he returned to base, but his instruments were improperly calibrated. The pilot didn't quite know where his B-29 aircraft was in relation to the surface of the water. Because Lake Mead appeared smooth as glass, his depth perception was distorted. Rather than skimming over the top of the water, the pilot smacked into the surface and skipped like a stone. The impact stripped off 3 of the engines and ripped a part of the tail away. Those on board had no choice but to abandon the aircraft immediately. 4 of the 5 crew members got away, but the 5th guy broke his arm trying to escape and his parachute got stuck on the plane. The crew had to chase the plane underwater and pull the 5th guy out of the window. In the end, they all survived. Number 8. Hiding places in the sewers. A pair of Ukrainian explorers checking out the city sewer system in Lviv, Ukraine, came across something pretty intriguing. They discovered the hiding place of dozens of Jewish people trying to escape the Nazi terrorizers during World War II. Back in the 1940s, over 100,000 Jews, roughly a third of the city's population back then, were massacred by the Nazis. But a few did manage to survive, usually by digging tunnels out of the ghettos and into the sewers. One of these was Christina Chiger, who escaped and then later wrote books about her experience. Well, these Ukrainian explorers claim that they found the exact place where Christina and her family lived in the sewers between 1943 and 1944. They even used her book as a guide while poking through the sewage system. They found a makeshift shelter littered with artifacts that may have been used by the hiding family. They found a corroded plate, a small figurine carved to look like a sheep, and pieces of glass wedged between bricks in the wall that had probably been used to stop the rats from getting in and stealing their food. Number 7. Grenade at Taco Bell. Taco Bell in Florida had to evacuate after a man walked into the restaurant with a hand grenade. The grenade dates back to World War II, with the man allegedly finding it during a fishing trip. He was magnet fishing when he reeled the grenade in. Then, hungry and perhaps wanting to brag about his awesome discovery, he drove it straight to Taco Bell. He didn't physically bring the grenade into the restaurant with him. He had the grenade stashed in a 5-gallon bucket in the trunk of his car. After a bit of confusion and panic at the restaurant, with the employees and customers being forced to evacuate, the Ocala Police Department showed up. They were able to confirm that the grenade wasn't an immediate danger, with the firing pin mechanism non-functional. They took the device and then destroyed it off-site. And so far as we know, the magnet fishermen didn't get in any trouble. If you found a World War II grenade while magnet fishing at your local river, would your first destination be a Taco Bell? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Forgotten mortars. In Humboldt, Tennessee, a family woke up to a rather shocking discovery. Xavier Dennis was alerted by a landscaper working in his backyard that there were some World War II mortars hidden in the dirt. The landscaper uncovered them while toiling in the backyard near the Dennis's shed. The family had been living in the house for about 10 years and had no idea they were sleeping with live mortars outside just waiting to explode. Well, only one of them was actually live. The other had its primer removed, leaving it as just a shell. The Jackson bomb unit came in and safely removed the live explosive. The family was able to hold on to the other one. They're now hoping to pawn it off at an antique shop for a few $100. Number 5. Tank in a swamp. An abandoned Soviet tank that had been underwater for over 7 decades was recently discovered in a swamp. The tank is a KV-1, the standard in heavy tank machinery at the time that the Germans were invading in 1941. It had a massive 75mm gun, thick armor plating, and was immune to most of the anti-tank weapons that the Germans were using. This made it a real beast in the Soviet army. The KV-1 was found by workers near the small town of Sino in Belarus. It appeared to have been scuttled with explosive charges. Workers and salvage crews found the tank with its turret upside down and totally separated from its chassis. Plus, its chassis was pretty much destroyed. The tank even looked blackened as if it had burned in a fire. From what the experts can put together, the tank was probably involved in the Battle of Seno. This was without a doubt one of the largest and bloodiest tank battles during the whole war. Around 2,250 tanks fought, with the Soviet Mechanized Corps counterattacking the advancing Germans. But the attack was a failure. The Germans kept pushing forward, and hundreds upon hundreds of tanks were lost in the mud. Number 4. Mass grave. Archaeologists in Poland had discovered a terrifying mass grave from World War II. The grave was found in an area that was occupied by the Nazis, containing the corpses of around 500 people. The archaeologists also uncovered bullets, wedding rings, and other buried personal effects. This area of Poland is known as Death Valley, with history telling us that at least 35,000 Polish citizens were executed back in 1939. The massacre is known as the Pomeranian Crime of 1939. But in 1945, there was another, more secret massacre. The war was over, and the Gestapo marched 600 Polish prisoners out into the woods and executed them. A lot of people thought the bodies had been burned, but as we can see from these excavations, they'd been buried in pits after they were burned. Archaeologists found that they'd been doused in a flammable substance, set on fire, then stuck in the ground. Right now, researchers are trying to use DNA technology to identify at least some of the victims. Those involved with the excavation say they hope to be able to at least tell some of the families what happened to their relatives 75 years ago. Number 3. The SS Bloody Marsh. In 1943, an oil tanker called the SS Bloody Marsh was hit by a torpedo and sank. In 2021, researchers with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration sent a remotely operated vehicle deep into the North Atlantic in search of the wreckage. They actually used satellite imagery from between 1997 and 2019 to look at oil slicks moving across the ocean. They believed the oil was steadily being leaked out of the destroyed tanker, and so they followed the oil slicks back to their source. And lo and behold, there she was. The SS Bloody Marsh was seen for the first time on camera, a rusted old boat with holes ripped through the hole where the torpedo struck. She's too deep now to do anything, but it's still pretty great that NOAA was able to locate the ship and document it. She was actually on her maiden voyage, traveling from Houston to New York with over 100,000 barrels of oil, when the German submarine U-66 sank her. It happened off the coast of South Carolina, blowing apart the engine room and killing 3 crew members. Number 2. The MK7 Tank. The MK7 Churchill was a heavy British infantry tank used in World War II. It's most famous today for its heavy armor and uncanny ability to climb steep slopes. The Churchill saw several different iterations during the war, as British defenses hurried as many out of the factories as possible to help bolster their defenses. It wasn't until Mark 7 that the tank was finally at its peak and entered into service with the Army. These tanks were sent everywhere, to North Africa, Italy, and throughout Western Europe. At least 250 tanks saw action on the Eastern Front. But after the war, they just weren't that useful. A bunch of these tanks were brought to the Warkop training area in Cumbria. Here they were used as targets. Even today, training takes place 7 days a week. There are dozens of tanks and at least 5 MK7 Churchill tanks half buried on the hills and totally wrecked. Number 1. Sunken submarine. In Southeast Asia, a submarine from World War II was just recently discovered. The submarine is believed to be the USS Grenadier, scuttled back in April of 1943 after it was battered by Japanese bombers. The surviving crew members were actually captured by the Japanese and sent to a prison camp for over 2 years. And while these people did survive, their submarine was lost. It remained at the bottom of the Strait of Malacca, about 90 miles from the south of Thailand, for 77 years. It now looks more like a marine nursery than a weapon of war. The wreckage was discovered with the help from Ben Raymonens, one of the divers who helped rescue the boys' soccer team from the Thai cave back in 2018. The entire expedition cost over $110,000, and the team couldn't even bring anything up from the ocean. All they were able to do was take pictures of the 300-foot-long vessel. It's currently sitting 260 feet deep, covered in fishing nets. The divers are still waiting for confirmation from the Naval History Command to see if it really is the USS Grenadier. Number 10. 2 wrecked ships. If you saw the pictures of these shipwrecks side by side, you'd probably think you were looking at the same ship. But in fact, these are 2 completely different shipwrecks off the coast of New Caledonia. They're both equally creepy, blood-rusted husks of their former selves. Both can be found not too far from the shore. And what makes this story really interesting is that they were both wrecked by the same captain. Both ships are named Ever Prosperity, originally based in Liberia. In 1965, the first Ever Prosperity accidentally went straight up onto the West Coast Barrier Reef and stranded itself. In 1970, the second Ever Prosperity did the exact same thing, running aground in New Caledonia and getting stuck. The only difference is that it happened 45 miles to the south. It was the same captain, basically the same boat, and the same stretch of coastline. And to this day, the Ever Prosperity remains stuck on the corals like a big, ugly metal eyesore. Number 9. Texas Ghost Farm. What's spookier place to find abandoned cars than at a ghost farm? In Texas, at the Hudson Farm, there have been about 100 cars decaying for several decades. The previous owner of the farm passed away back in 2018 after a long life of being a mechanic and a car enthusiast. He hoarded dozens of cars under the pretext that he'd either fix them up or use them for parts. But of course, he never used them for anything. At some point, he had over 40 Hudson vehicles collecting dust on his farm, which could just be the largest collection of its kind. There are a few rare cars to be found hiding away in the shadowy barns of the ghost farm. An iconic Hornet, both an ordinary one and a Hollywood version with 2 doors. But by far the most fascinating vehicle abandoned here is a 1942 4-door Hudson built right before the US entered the Second World War. They didn't make another one like this until 1946 when the war was over. But unless you really know what you're looking for, you might not even be able to recognize any of these vehicles. They're hiding in the abandoned grassy fields, in several crumbling barns, and even in a dark patch of forest just away from the main property. Number 8. SUV in the cornfield. In a cornfield in Wisconsin, something grisly happened. Homicide investigators were called to investigate 4 bodies discovered inside an abandoned SUV that drove into a cornfield off a rural road. According to the Dunn County Sheriff's Office, the discovery was made on Sunday afternoon in Sheridan. The 4 people inside the SUV died from gunshot wounds and had been dead for under 24 hours. Yet investigators haven't been able to find a motive. There's no link between the people in the SUV and the local community. Plus, nobody knows how the SUV got into the cornfield in the first place. This is one of those rare instances where a creepy abandoned vehicle also happens to be an unsolved murder case. Whoever abandoned the SUV must have taken off on foot, yet they haven't been found. What could have possibly happened between the 4 in the car and the assailant that left them there in the field like a sacrifice to some cornfield demon? Well, we just don't know. Why do you think a black SUV was abandoned in the middle of a rural cornfield with 4 dead bodies inside? Let us know any wild theories you might have in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 7. Lost Colombian drug plane. In 2009, a cargo plane holding nearly 2 tons of cocaine crashed on the island of Utila in Honduras. The island is not the safest or the most peaceful place to visit. There are airstrips here used for Colombian cartel planes to reload with fuel as they make drug runs between countries. And then there's the Honduran jungle itself, filled with giant spiders, deadly snakes, and thick foliage. The entire reason the plane crashed in the first place was that the Honduran military blocked a runway so that the plane couldn't land. It then ran out of fuel while flying over the island and crashed into the trees. 1 pilot was dead, 2 were injured, and the plane shattered into 3 pieces. It is still in the jungle today in the exact same condition it was over a decade ago. It's a twin-engine Jetstream 30, and the path it cut through the jungle is still visible. It made a disastrous landing, carving a whole strip out of the trees. And in revenge, the trees are now growing directly through the plane, slowly but surely taking it over. Number 6. A mobile home in the road. There was a bit of a mystery in Missouri just a few weeks ago when an abandoned mobile home turned up in the middle of the road. It's hard to say if this falls under the jurisdiction of an abandoned vehicle or an abandoned piece of property, but either way, it's pretty weird. The mobile home was abandoned near the town of Republic on Farm Road 168. Somebody actually had the audacity to take the mobile home off its trailer and use concrete blocks to hold it up in the middle of the street. And it blocked off all traffic because nobody could get around the thing. It's like whoever was driving the mobile home to its new location changed their mind. Someone just offloaded their trailer and left it there for somebody else to deal with. Sadly, the home has since been demolished. The Greene County Highway Department smashed the thing to pieces and then disposed of it so people could keep driving down the street. And while we can't say which creepy weirdo is responsible for leaving a mobile home in the middle of the road, the sheriff's office has said that a person of interest has been identified and that they will hopefully be pressing charges very soon. Number 5. Cartersville abandoned plane. In Cartersville, Georgia, there's a mysterious abandoned turboprop Grumman G159 totally covered in graffiti. It's been abandoned here for just about 2 decades and would be pretty much invisible amongst the trees if it weren't for all the bright tagging on the plane's exterior. The vehicle was abandoned near a river sometime in the early 2000s and subsequently picked apart by scavengers. Every single important piece of plane was picked clean, even its wiring and instrument panels. And yet the leather seats, the fuselage, and the hull of the airliner itself have remained relatively okay. As for how the creepy Cartersville plane was abandoned in the first place, you can thank Phoenix Air for that one. They allegedly dumped the plane in the woods after scrapping the vehicle when they had no more use for it. It can now be found near a walking trail and a gravel service road beyond an open meadow and inside a dark and spooky grove of trees. Would you like to check it out and maybe add your own artistic touch? Number 4. Acadia National Park plane crash. A plane crashed in the Acadia National Park back in 1970, and its creepy remains are still there today. It happened on June 30th when a small Piper airplane with nobody on board except the pilot vanished while on its way from Boston to Newfoundland. For 3 months, nobody had any clue what happened to the plane or the pilot, who was a retired Air Force captain named Robert McGowan. But alas, the plane was eventually discovered near the top of a mountain in the national park. Robert's body was also found mangled in the heap of twisted metal that was once an airplane. It was pretty gruesome stuff. The body was taken away, but the airplane and its pieces never were. It's been there for over 50 years, becoming something of an unofficial tourist attraction. Though, to be honest, the attraction is a rather disturbing one. It's technically the location of an accidental death. It's like visiting the site of a car accident on the side of a freeway. This is where a man died, and that's why visiting the old crash site and the broken plane is such a creepy undertaking. Number 3. Sheffield Car Graveyard. There's a creepy car graveyard inside an abandoned warehouse in Sheffield. This place is so unnerving that even though it's filled with cool abandoned cars, you probably wouldn't stick around long enough to check them out. The cars were discovered when an urban explorer broke into the warehouse, not realizing it was being used by a local car dealership as a storage facility. But the vehicles had their windows smashed, there were dents and footprints all over them, and they'd clearly been collecting dust for a very long time. It's not exactly clear what happened to the abandoned cars aside from obviously being vandalized by kids. And to make things creepier, the urban explorer found signs of squatters. There was an old mattress in the corner, kitchen utensils lying around, and all the signs that vagrants had been living inside the place. In the end, the cars here weren't that exciting anyway. One of them was a newer Ford Focus ST, though it's not really something to write home about. It was more the fact that the explorer found the remnants of squatters and destruction inside a warehouse that was supposed to be housing cars for a local dealership. That's what makes the whole thing so bizarre. Number 2. Spooky Taxi Graveyard. There's a very creepy parking garage in East London, England, which has turned into something of an unofficial graveyard for abandoned taxis. It's quite well hidden, part of the City Park parking garage. And while the bottom floors might be used by everyday people for their parking needs, the top floors are reserved for broken and abandoned taxis. There's a whole fleet of these vehicles that have been sitting there collecting dust for the past years. Most of them have their windshields caved in, they've been heavily vandalized, almost all the tires are flat, and it looks like the perfect place to be murdered. Why are there so many taxis in a single parking garage? The answer is the pandemic. At the height of the lockdowns, almost no taxis were functioning. Hundreds of black cabs were forced to park in random fields outside the city, though this led to massive thefts of catalytic converters. And as the city changed following the pandemic, there just wasn't enough need for taxis. Dozens and dozens of these cars got put in the parking garage graveyard, and nobody ever came back for them. Number 1. Mystery Boat. Prairie du Chien is a town with a population of about 6,000 people. It's located near the border of Wisconsin. You might think of the town as the gateway between the Mississippi and the Great Lakes, and so it's no surprise that there are plenty of abandoned boats in the area. But none of this explains why there's currently a mysterious abandoned tugboat that sank in Fort Madison, Iowa, sitting in Prairie du Chien Golf Course. The ship in question is the L. Wade Childress. It was once a push boat on the Mississippi River, though it sank in 1985 after being battered by ice chunks on one particularly brutal winter. It was raised back out of the water the next year, and that's as far as the records go. We know the ship was originally built in 1948. There have been rumors that the ship was moved to Prairie du Chien as an attempt to start a unique bed and breakfast. But the hard truth is that nobody has any clue how the boat ended up 200 miles away from its original location, out of the water, and sitting on the back lawn of a golf course. The mystery ship attracts a lot of urban explorers who say the lack of a no trespassing sign basically means come on and explore it. The ship is just a shell of its former self, with nothing but creepy rooms that are rusted and rotting. Most of the stuff inside hadn't really moved when it sank. The stove is still there, the bathrooms, even a fuse box. There's something super creepy about the view from the upper captain's area too. It's not hard to squint your eyes a bit and imagine this tugboat in its glory days moving up and down the Mississippi River. What's the creepiest abandoned vehicle you've ever found? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks a lot for watching today's video. Remember to hit subscribe and come back soon for more amazing videos right here on American Eye.